Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down here in the catacombs. Very apologetic for the fact that we have not had a show in a week and a half, Rob. Is that about right? I think so. Just coming off a trip to London, which was wonderful. We were over there for the 10th anniversary of the passing of the late, great Michael Davies. The Latin Mass Society presented a conference which was wonderful, and it was great to find out that the memory of Michael Davies has indeed not faded, and many young people showed up for this conference, in which the point was to remember the legacy and the work of the great Michael Davies. Now, there are things happening in the church today, and in Rome especially, that just justify description. I don't even know where to begin, so I think I will begin with, fresh off this conference in honor of Michael Davies, to say and to remind our viewers that a man like Michael Davies would not have been in any sense surprised by what's happening presently in Rome. And this has been a problem with the traditional Catholic message for some time, and especially in the last 10 years. This idea that what we are all about is merely the liturgical preferences, lobbying for the Mass that we prefer and we like incense and chant and nice vestments and all of that. This was not the raison d'etre of a man like Michael Davies or Archbishop Lefebvre or the pioneers of the traditional Catholic movement. Why is this so? Now, what's important to understand is that the traditionalists of old, the pioneer traditionalists, would not have been in any sense surprised by what's happening right now in Rome with this Synod on the family, which obviously is skidding out of control. And what I mean by that is what they believed and what traditional Catholicism has always been about is acknowledging that the Church, the Catholic Church, has been infiltrated by those who want to change the orientation, change the identity, change the doctrine, change the liturgy, change everything about what it means to be Catholic. So in a sense, a true traditionalist, one who's been paying attention or who has been involved with the traditional Catholic movement for 20, 30, 40 years, understands that this Synod on the family was in a sense very inevitable. In other words, they began tampering with how we prayed. They began tampering with the Latin Mass 40 years ago because they understood that if you could tamper with how Catholics pray, you would ultimately be able to tamper with how they believe. And so what we're seeing now is just the natural outcome of revolution in the Catholic Church. Now, I'm very sorry if our neo-Catholic friends don't understand this, but this has been going on for a long time. Pope Francis, who is emerging, in my opinion, as one of the worst popes in history, did not come out of a vacuum. This has been the logical progression, or I should say regression, of modernism which was targeted by Pope St. Pius X 100 years ago or more in Pascendi, that they had infiltrated the church at that point. They were in the heart and bosom of the church, as he put it. And at the time of the Second Vatican Council, they came out of the closet and they began to refashion the Catholic Church. So please understand something. We're not actually all that surprised by what is happening. In fact, there's a certain sense in which there's a realization that finally the boil has been lanced, and that many people, not just traditionalists, but many people are beginning to see what's been going on for an awfully long time. The church is in the hands of those who want to completely and radically change her identity. First they started with liturgy, then they went to doctrine, now they're on the moral questions. And they are hard at it in Rome right now, changing the church's teaching on moral questions. I realize they deny this. Oh, we could never ever change the church's moral teaching. But in fact, de facto, that's precisely what they're doing. So what we have this week is this relatio, that is sort of the working document, the midpoint of the Synod on the family, is signaling where this is going. Now, this relatio appeared on the Vatican website on October 13th of all dates, the anniversary of the miracle of the sun at Fatima, which is very foreboding in its own right, obviously. But this is the working document, of course. Only a conversation, right, Rob?
Right.
Only a conversation. They're not saying anything. They're not changing any doctrine. They're just having a conversation in order to produce the final document of the Synod, which is going to happen next week. Of course, this is not going to end next week, though. We're going to have a year-long conversation about the Church's need to change or shore up her pastoral approach towards things like divorced and remarried Catholics. Adulterers was what they used to be called, although Cardinal Casper finds that very offensive. Rob, you heard this, yes. Very offensive that to use the word adultery, because, well, even though our Lord... Yes, it's the sixth commandment, but that doesn't matter. To say that these folks are adulterers, they're divorced, they're remarried, now they want sacraments, is offensive to them, and we need to find a pastoral approach to be less offensive, evidently less offensive than was our Lord, who used that word, and the Ten Commandments themselves include the word adultery, of course.
To be fair, though, what did he know?
What did he know? Exactly. What did our Lord know? That's the question. So tell me, Rob, why exactly are the princes of the Catholic Church having a conversation right now about welcoming homosexuals, in which they make the following statement? Now, this, of course, is unprecedented in the history of the Church. Why are they having this conversation, which leads with the following quotation? Now, keep in mind, this is in reference to the proud practitioners of a sin that when I was a child, and presumably you're younger than I am, Rob, but when you were a child, you were told that this sin cries to heaven for vengeance. It's intrinsically evil. It's a mortal sin. This is how the Synod on the family, the princes of the Church, are now talking about the sin that we, or the practitioners of the sin, that we as children were told in Catholic, mainstream Catholic schools was a sin that cried to heaven for vengeance. I'll read you the quote. This week, this is what they said. Quote, homosexuals have gifts and qualities to offer the Christian community. Are we capable of welcoming these people, guaranteeing to them a fraternal space in our community? Often they wish to encounter a church that offers them a welcome home. Are our communities capable of providing that, accepting and valuing their sexual orientation without compromising Catholic doctrine on the family and matrimony? End quote. Now, this is, again, just a conversation. It's not a big deal. They're just having a conversation. And according to Cardinal Timothy Dolan on CBS this morning, this is merely Francis's approach. What he's trying to do, according to Dolan, is, quote, take the teachings of the Church and present them, get this, in a fresh, exciting, and enchanting new way.
Well, it's certainly enchanting.
Yes, and it's fresh, and it's new, and it's exciting. Now here's the question, Rob. How exactly do you tell someone that their lifestyle is offensive to God, mortally sinful, and condemned by the Church as intrinsically evil in a fresh, exciting, and enchanting way?
I don't know.
How do you do this? How do you do this? How do I say to a murderer, okay, you're killing people, you're going to go to hell, but the Church, we're working right now, Mr. Murderer, on coming up with a fresh, new, and enchanting way of telling you that you're going to hell. And yet that's what they're doing. Now, Cardinal Dolan and company, when this document was released, before it was released, actually, they were saying, specifically, if this document, says Cardinal Dolan, becomes public, and he was talking to Father Jonathan Morris, if this document, which is the working document, becomes public, the press is going to misinterpret it. They're going to think a working document is the final draft. They're going to jump to conclusions, says Cardinal Dolan. Now, this is on Sirius XM News and Issues, the Catholic channel, with Father Jonathan Morris. So the question is, if they thought that the document was going to be misinterpreted, why exactly did they put it on the Vatican website? It wasn't like it was leaked. They put it on the Vatican website, and of course everyone is having a legitimate freak-out session now over this document, which seems to be changing, or at least heading in the direction of changing the Church's moral teaching on homosexuality, on divorced and remarried Catholics, on adultery, essentially. If they were worried about it, one can't help but wonder why they wrote it and then posted it on the Vatican website. But of course, this is just a conversation. It's not a big deal. The cardinals are just having a conversation. Now, here's the thing. I think this is already a done deal. When Joe Sixpack, the poor fellow, finds out that at the highest echelons of the Catholic Church, It is being discussed that divorced and remarried Catholics should not be called adulterers, that homosexuals should be given what did they say, a welcoming space in the church or whatever. He doesn't really care what the final document is. What he says is, I'm with him on this. He says, well, if the princes of the church are debating this, guess what? It's debatable. And so I don't think they can necessarily retract now. I don't really think it matters that much what happens in the final analysis, what the final document reads. The point is, the Catholic Church has now put this up for debate. And I think this is something that's gravely concerning, not just for traditional Catholics, but for an awful lot of people. What's happening? What are these men doing? It's very difficult to understand, but this, it seems to us, is an apocalyptic moment. It's a moment that enjoys no precedent in history. We've never seen anything like it. Now, all is not lost. There is a small but vocal minority of archbishops and cardinals who are speaking at this very moment against the direction in which this synod on the family is obviously heading. Vatican Radio, for example, has it that the president of the Polish Episcopal Conference, Archbishop Stanislaw Gadecki, quote, did not hesitate to say that this document departs from the teaching of John Paul II. So this is the irony. This is the irony. They just canonized this man, and they are already in open sort of a rebellion against his teaching in Familiaris Consortio. So even John Paul now is too traditional for this new cadre of modernists and secular and liberal cardinals who are now at the helm in the Catholic Church. Even that it can be noticed, this is again the Archbishop Gadecki says that, and even in it can be noticed, in this document can be noticed traces of anti-marriage ideology. According to the Archbishop, this text also highlights the lack of clear vision for the Synod Assembly. Raymond Cardinal Burke, who is fast emerging as the hero of this sorry state of affairs, said the following of this mid-synod document, quote, clearly the response to the document and the discussion which immediately followed its presentation manifested that a great number of the synod fathers found it objectionable. The document lacks a solid foundation in sacred scriptures and the magisterium. Now, why is it, Rob, that we are having cardinals of the church present working documents which lack solid foundation in the sacred scriptures and in the magisterium? What is going on? Burke continues, in a matter on which the church has a very rich and clear teaching, it gives the impression of inventing a totally new, what one synod father called revolutionary, teaching on marriage and the family. It invokes repeatedly and in a confused manner principles which are not defined, for example, the law of graduality. Okay, end quote. I mean, the horses are already out of the barn. I mean, if a cardinal of the Catholic Church has to come out, look at a document that was presented by the cardinals, by the synod, and say that it lacks scriptural foundation and that it's a violation and that it's revolutionary, obviously we have a problem, whatever happens with the outcome. Now, Cardinal Mueller, who's the head of the CDF, called the same document undignified, shameful, and completely wrong, end quote. I don't quite see how we can get past this. In other words, this is already a done deal. They're already discussing it. Okay, they may tweak it a little bit, but the point is, their wrong-headedness is patently obvious even to their fellow cardinals, the more conservative-leaning cardinals. So bad is it that the Archbishop of Latvia has called for urgent prayer for this synod. This is an incredible moment. This is a moment that obviously manifests the fact that the church is in crisis. This is it. We're watching history in the making. This is unprecedented, and clearly the Holy Catholic Church has been infiltrated, and it's time for all of us to wake up. Now, this past weekend, I had the honor of addressing the Angelus Press Conference in Kansas City, Missouri. I came away from this conference thinking that if you are still worrying about the canonical status of the Society of St. Pius X, if you're out there trying to attack the Society of St. Pius X in the middle of all this unprecedented crisis in the church, I'm sorry, but you're part of the problem. you really don't get it. Archbishop Lefebvre was clearly right 40 years ago when he took the stand that he took. And we have some things that are just defying description going on right now with respect to the society. There is a certain priest, which will be known to many of our readers, who offers the traditional Latin Mass, who is a missionary for the new evangelization. Now, he took it upon himself a few weeks back, after the Society of St. Pius X had organized a very important Mass of reparation at the same time that a black Mass was taking place in Oklahoma City. And after the Society of St. Pius X had this Mass of reparation, this priest came out and actually said that the Society of St. Pius X was more offensive to God than the Satanists who were conducting the Black Mass. I don't know quite how to even handle that, Rob. Do you have any suggestions? What do you even say? Where do you even begin with that? He stands in front of the camera and he puts on his little show.
It is true that God is going to be more displeased with the Society of St. Pius X for their disobedience than with the Satanists, because obedience is the...
I'm not kidding. This is how this man, roughly, that's a rough facsimile of how this man sounds. I don't even care what he says or does. But that he has a following is staggeringly shocking. That you would believe that practitioners of a black mass, people who celebrate a black blasphemous mass, are somehow more pleasing to God than the priests of the Society of St. Pius X, who are only trying to practice the Catholic faith as it was practiced for 2,000 years. This borders on the demonic. And people who are still engaging in this anti-SSPX campaign, and as we have said before down here, we're not Society of St. Pius X. I don't go to their masses. It's not because out of principle that I don't go. I just don't happen to go because I have a wonderful priest friend here in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, who offers the traditional Latin Mass, and that's where we've gone for years. So I'm not a partisan for the SSPX. But that anyone would still be saying this or making this case against the good priests and families of the Society of St. Pius X in the present milieu, it's just shocking, it's scandalous, and it's ridiculous. So I think really what we're seeing right now, what's happening in the Synod, what's happening in Rome, many people are waking up. Thanks be to God. EWTN, Raymond Arroyo, the world over, had an interview of Cardinal Burke recently, which was like something from the preconciliar era. We're seeing many people waking up to the fact that the church has been infiltrated. And this is not a happy moment, but it certainly is a clarifying moment. And it's time for all Catholics, traditionalists, traditional-leaning, conservative Catholics, to recognize that sad reality and to join Cardinal Burke, to get on board with the various family initiatives that are trying to defend the family and the church's moral teaching. LifeSite News comes to mind. And recognize that this is unprecedented. We really must stand together. And I think included in that stand together is recognize that people like Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre really did see the beast. They saw the eyes of the beast. They understood what was coming, and they tried to warn the world against it. Archbishop Lefebvre, ultimately, in my opinion, will be recognized as a hero of this era. And if you don't realize that, give yourself some time, say some prayers, and you will realize that in fact is the reality. So we'll close this episode tonight with a quote from Archbishop Lefebvre, which I think is very appropriate. 40 years ago, Archbishop Lefebvre said, quote, "Now we are bound to pray, to redouble our prayers. We are witnessing an assault by Satan against the church as has never been seen before. We must pray to Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary, to come to our assistance, for we can have no idea what horrors tomorrow may bring. It is not possible for God to tolerate indefinitely these blasphemies, these sacrileges, which are committed against his glory and majesty," end quote. He predicted what was happening, what would happen in the church, and obviously his predictions were quite accurate. There is where we stand, ladies and gentlemen. It is a nightmare in the church right now. We mustn't lose hope. We must understand that the powers of hell are focusing all of their attention on Rome, on Peter, on the Vatican, to try to bring about the total triumph of the Antichrist and to defeat and dethrone Christ the King. We've known this all along. It seems to be happening right now. It hasn't happened yet. There's a chance to change this. There are great men such as Cardinal Raymond Burke who are fighting every day and night now to push back these forces for evil, but there's no point anymore in denying that indeed we are facing forces of evil inside of our own beloved church. We need to say our prayers and be aware of this and do whatever we possibly can to contribute to and to be a part of the solution rather than the problem. So, for Remnant TV, I'm Michael Matt, and we'll see you next time.